My name is Melissa. I'd like to share a story about a person that has endured abuse all the way from the moment probably that I was in my mother's womb into adulthood, ranging from isolated techniques, physical abuse, some sexual abuse, being trafficked, sexually assaulted, left for dead, kidnapped, taking my first flight on Delta Airlines in handcuffs. I've been a nurse now for 22 years, and I had told my mother when I was 4 years old that one day I was going to be a nurse, and she laughed at me, but I made it regardless of circumstances. And from my pain and my experiences, I do everything in my power. If it's sharing my story, if it's leading someone that I see is headed in the direction or is going through what I went through, that I step in and be their advocate. Well, it all started when I was a toddler. Up until about the age of 4, I was kept in a room that was made, it was just like a 5x8 room with wooden floors, wooden walls. I was made to pretty much stay in that room the entirety of the day, but I wouldn't be allowed out. I spent a lot of time in that room, and I was always very quiet, very shy, didn't know how to communicate because I was kept isolated. There was this one evening my parents were asleep. I don't know what made me do it, but I did it. Somehow climbed over. They had like this paneling, and they had 2x4s that were built onto this room to where I couldn't get out. In the middle of the night, I climbed over. I was able to crawl out or climb out, came out on the other side. I was not allowed to have sweets. Anytime anyone gave sweets for me, my parents would take it and hold it, and they later would eat it. They would eat it in front of me, and they thought it was funny. But I never knew what anything sweet tasted like. There was a pack of lemon cookies. I'll never forget the taste of the lemon, because I went and saw them. I didn't really know what they were, but when I bit into it, and it just tasted so good, and it was lemony and it was sweet, I don't know, I just tried to climb back in because I didn't want them to know that I had gotten out. But the paneling, however it was, fell. When they woke up that morning, they saw the paneling was down. That meant that I got out. When my father would leave to go to work, my mother, she would tie me up to the bed so that she would leave. I don't think my father knew that she would leave the house. I would stay tied up in the bed. Anytime I'd wet the bed, they would hold me down in the tub and pour ice cold water. My dad would have my mother hold me down while he poured cold water over me as a form of punishment for urinating on myself. My dad's sisters, his mother, and my mother's grandparents, none of them ever knew. And I was always very quiet, and I would mimic animals. I would act like a dog, like a puppy dog. I would whine like a dog because I knew that if I whined, somebody would pat me on the head. Somebody would give me love and attention, something that I never got from my parents. And that never occurred. The relatives, they thought, well, that's kind of weird, but it never dawned on them why I was doing this. Because I was like exposed to a world that I'd never known. I never knew that donuts existed. And but they had a Christmas, gather thing. Everyone was asleep, and my grandfather had brought these a box of Dunkin' Donuts, and I took a bite out of every single donut because I wanted to taste each one because they just tasted so good. Or just spraying perfume or whatever it was, playing with things, touching, because no one knew what was really going on in my parents' home. Once I turned 9 years old, my parents got divorced. My mother, she had left my father for a black man. And so back then, that's in the 70s. So that's real rough. Anyway, needless to say, my father got custody of me. During the 70s, men never got custody of their children. I asked my father, back in 2010, I just wanted to hear, I'm sorry. All I ever wanted was, I was sorry. My mother was murdered when I was 18, so I never got that sorry from her. But my father told me, when I asked him about that, and he told me, he said,
well, we just kept you in the cage for protection. You keep an animal in a cage. You don't keep your kid in a cage. But he couldn't apologize. He couldn't say he was sorry. I was definitely afraid. I had a lot of fear, because anytime if I were to get hurt, just something like, example, my father had to slam on the brakes and I was riding in the front seat sitting in my mother's lap, and my head hit the windshield and cracked the windshield. So instead of them being concerned that I might have had a hematoma or some type of head injury, he pinched me and just talked nasty the whole entire way home. Look what you did. You broke the window. You broke the window. And I held my tears in. I refused to cry because I knew if I cried, I was going to be beat. And so that's something my dad really hated about me, is the fact that no matter how long it took, I would never cry. I would just hold my breath because I refused to let him see tears come out. The only person that I ever truly was super duper angry with probably was my mother, because I felt like she left me behind. But I understand why, she herself endured abuse from him as well. I went to the guidance counselor in the school system where I was from. Back then, guidance counselors were on the parents' side. Before I could even make it home on the school bus, the guidance counselor had already called and told my dad what had happened. And I didn't hear the conversation, so I don't know what happened. But I ended up coming to visit his sister in Georgia. She could hear how he talked to me on the phone, and she knew that that wasn't the appropriate environment for me. She had me stay with her for a couple of weeks for an Easter vacation. I came down and started sharing things because none of my family knew this. She asked me, she said, would you like to live with me? Would you like to come and move down here? And I was like, yes, I would. I loved her. She was like the closest thing I ever had to a mother. In 1983, my father agreed to giving guardianship to my aunt and uncle. The day I left home to come down here was the first day he had ever told me he loved me. And he cried. And he hugged me and said he loved me, which I thought was the weirdest thing. And so things were going great. Everything was wonderful. My father and stepmother, they had separated. Him and I were in the swimming pool together, and I will never forget. I was swimming, and he just put his arms around me in the pool. And when he did, it was like this lightning bolt of fear just came over me. And all of a sudden, there was this man that was standing at our pool. Now, we lived out in the country where farms and lots of fields. And this man came to the pool and he asked, excuse me, can you tell me how to get to such and such? This such and such place didn't exist. And at that instant, broke that. He let go of me. He stood up to walk over to answer his question. And he told him, no, I don't. I've never heard of that place. And the man vanished, gone. All I know is I will always say it was a guardian angel. I was 13. I was an athlete in school, and he pushed himself on me, trying to kiss me when his wife wasn't in the home. But fortunately, I did have some strength, and I fought my way out of that. When I was a senior in high school, it's like a couple of weeks before graduation, I had found out I was pregnant. I had gotten pregnant in May. I was in a relationship with a person of color, and it was 2 weeks before graduation, and my aunt was making my graduation dress, and she had done, a second thing of measurements, but she also noticed I was sleeping, I was agitated, or just being isolated. She noticed some change she knew, and I'll never forget that morning when I was walking out to leave to go to school. She said, Melissa, are you pregnant? It's like, no, ma'am. Like, no way would I tell her I was pregnant. I saved the pregnancy test and doctor's appointment. She found the photograph, and the next thing you know, I was called out of school early. So, but it wasn't just her in the car, it was her and my uncle. And before we could leave the school parking lot, she said, are you pregnant? I asked you this already, you're fully, yes, I'm pregnant. So anyway, that evening or that afternoon, no one in the community knew anything about what I was doing in my personal life. They went around and they told all their neighbors that I had become pregnant by a black man. I was going to have a black child. Made me call all of my relatives, my grandparents, my dad. Through that whole afternoon of listening to all these bombarding comments, and all I know is hearing them, how disgraced they were with me. And how could I do that? Because my mother did that to my dad. How could I do that? I'm an embarrassment. I'm ashamed. I packed a little bag and I wrote a little letter and I told them, I'm sorry for hurting you. I thank you for everything you did. And made my way to my daughter's father's home. I took a cab. Tried to knock, nobody answered, turned the knob, it opened. And his father is standing at the end of the hallway with a shotgun in his underwear, and he was like, who the hell are you? And what are you here for? Or something to that effect. And I said, well, I'm here for so-and-so. And he was like, I should have known. He's over there. Needless to say, he was not very helpful. His family did the same thing. I answered an ad in the paper for a live-in babysitter. She has 2 children, nice lady. And of course, I had nowhere to go. So I stayed there for a little bit, and it was great. She gave me a little stipend, along with I could eat and had shelter, and I was pregnant. She knew my situation. And she was a white woman, and she was getting stories or, rumors that I had a visitor that wasn't our color. And so she let me know that, I'm sorry, but you have 24 hours, you're going to need to leave. I get on the phone, and the next door neighbor had this friend. First time I saw him, I was like, God, he's so cute. Him and I would talk, and I let him know what was going on, and he started asking me questions. He said, well, do you have anywhere else you can go? Can you do this? Can you do that? Blah, 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 blah. I had already inquired through DFACS if there was any programs, if there was somebody that could help me. DFACS was like, nope, there's nothing we can do until after you have your baby. I had told him everything, and he said, well, you just stay there, get your whatever belongings you have, see if she's got any money. Do I need some gas money? And he was coming. I thought he was coming to save me. She had this $20 bill. And anyway, he came. He went and put gas in the car with that $20 bill. He started riding around in Atlanta, and there was this one street that a long time ago is called Auburn Avenue. It's still there, but back then, it was a very well-known area where prostitutes were. But I didn't know that because I didn't live anywhere near Atlanta. He took me around, and I saw these girls just walking around in negligees and heels, and I was like, this is weird. Why are they dressed like this? And he's just riding around, and he's not really saying a whole lot. So he took me to Metropolitan. And he explained, this is what you'll do. He started talking to me and telling me, all you're going to do is you're going to walk down the sidewalk, and someone's going to come up to you, and they're going to ask you questions. They're going to offer you money to do things. He said, don't worry, I'm going to follow you. I'll take care of you. You're going to be all right. I get out and I start walking. Yep, just like he said, they pull up and they'd ask if you want to date. To me, dating was you went to the movie theater, they took you somewhere or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Oh, this is easy, and that's in my mind. That's where I'm thinking. And so I get in the car. He had told me where to have the man park the car. It was this parking lot, empty parking lot, and he parked his car like 3 parking spaces over. Well, this man didn't like where we were, and he said he wanted to go somewhere else. So he took me to this other little driveway, and at that point, that was the first time I had ever been raped. He held something to my neck that felt like a knife and told me what he was going to do. And he had the nerve to drop me back off to the parking lot once he was done. So I got in the car with Romeo, and, Romeo wants to know where money is. And it's like, I don't have any money. This is what happened. He wanted me to tell him what happened. What did he do? He said, don't worry about it. I'm going to take you back out there and you'll get it next time. It got a little easier, but it never felt any better. So I chose the option of not fighting. It's how I survived as long as I did. because I never fought back. Maybe a couple of nights later, it was a different scenario, but at the hotel. And the man just kicked the door in and did the same thing, raped. It was just constant, habitual rape, over and over. Not that it gets easier, it's just it becomes a part of life. Because now you're in survival mode. Now it's about how do I keep myself alive and how do I escape? Because every bit of money that I make, because he follows me everywhere, he gets all of my money. He introduced me to drugs. One thing I never did is I never did whatever they would shoot up drugs or any of those things, because I remember seeing movies, of how people were and how it would destroy people. I never visually saw it in real life until being in my situation. I gave birth to her when I was in jail. I was locked up for prostitution. I was in labor with her for 3 days, and they would transport me back and forth to the hospital from the jail, ride around with my hands handcuffed and in labor, and they handcuff you to your bed, and I gave birth to her in handcuffs. She needed to stay with her grandmother because I was in jail. So that was the first time I had seen her father, as he came up to sign the birth certificate, and he took her home with them. That's when he introduced me to. And that's one of their ways of getting you stuck and makes people very paranoid and scared. On top of the fear you already have, it all blows it all out of proportion. So you're extremely scared at that point. You don't know what to do. And then you become addicted. You're not allowed to prostitute without a pimp. And this one was a very famous one. His name was Blood. That was his street name. I ended up getting in his car. I came up with this thing of trying to figure out how to keep myself from being one of those victims of his. So I don't know, I came up with this story that my granddad, he had this trust fund set up for me. But once I turned like the age of 25, at that time I wasn't 25, that I would get a hold of this trust fund. He wanted to take and more or less kidnap. It is kidnapping. It's me and another girl, him and another pimp. The other pimp's name was Dallas. There were two well-known pimps in Atlanta, Georgia. So they get us in the car. We're told we're going to get in the car. Next thing you know, we don't know anything. We haven't taken any belongings, nothing. We're just told to get in the car. And we're flying down, riding, and they're riding, and she knows, the girl, because she's been with him. And she was like, I want out, and she just started fussing and going and saying, I was like, just be quiet, please, just be quiet. Just be quiet, because I just didn't want to ride in the trunk, because those are the things I heard about this person. And it's like, I just want to stay alive, just shut up. He had Dallas pull over on the side of the highway, and he rapped, because she wouldn't stop talking, and he took the telephone cord. Where he had this, I have no idea. Like I said, he was a weirdo, and he did weird, vicious things that people say he had things. And he took the telephone cord and just wrapped it around her neck, and just kept pulling. Just shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up. And she stopped breathing on the side of the road there. We get up to D.C. D.C. wasn't what they wanted, and I end up in New Jersey. I was in the middle, and all these pimps surrounded. And so this blood fellow was being nice, because I was, like I said, I had already given him that little epiphany of what I could do for him in my life. He had, we can get married, and we can this. He gave all this fruity conversation, which that was weird, because that's not his reputation. So anyway, I was not able to get away, because he followed me just like any other would do. So there's no escape. You have no way of escape. And one thing, he didn't have me using drugs. He made sure that I was always looking, quote unquote, beautiful. This one day we came in, and about to go to sleep. Yeah, I want to say, yeah, just getting ready to go to bed. And all of a sudden, there was a knock on the door. And I was like, knock on the door? That is not a normal knock. So he hid in the bathroom. Don't know why he hid in the bathroom, but he hid in the bathroom. So I went and I looked through the peephole and I saw guns on both sides of the peephole. And they were like, Melissa, open the door. I was like, oh, I'm saved. I was like, oh my God, somebody knows my name. Oh my God. And I opened the door because I knew I'd be okay now because these bounty hunters had come up there because I was on a property bond. And they were staying in a few hotel rooms down. And because he had transformed me so much, I looked nothing like I did. That they didn't even know it was me. They were on their way of leaving and going back to Atlanta because they couldn't find me. And he said my name in the parking lot or on the balcony as we were walking past them. They heard my name and they were like, bingo! And then we got her. And they were real nice. And they took me, whatever, out to breakfast. You know, of course, I'm riding in the back of their car in handcuffs, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know where that airport up there in New York is. I don't know, LaGuardia, whatever that is, somewhere up there in New York, the big air. But anyway, here I am walking through the airport, this young girl, 21, however old I was, I can't remember if I was 21, 22, whatever it is. But I was in handcuffs, and, you know, people were looking real weird. They're like, wait, why is this young girl in handcuffs? What did she do? You know, walking through New York airport, you know, they're just like, ooh, that's some serious stuff there. And I'm like, yeah, a prostitute. Wow. We're going through all this for a prostitute. And so that was my first experience with my first plane flight. I rode Delta in handcuffs back to Atlanta. When I was about 36 years old was when I first had that experience where a man actually treated me as a human being, as a woman. And from that point on, it was life-altering for me. Women that are in abusive situations, they're going to stay with the abuser. They'll leave 7 times and come back. It's a known fact. It's going to take them many times before they finally make it up in their mind that that's it, I'm done. So anyway, I got my act together. I got myself clean, got myself in school. Therapist, the one that was my therapist was helping me with me wanting to stop using drugs. She took me to the school, paid for my application fee because she believed in me. I became a nurse. Been a nurse of the year with Kaiser Permanente. Been in the Atlanta Journal nominated out of 400 nurses in the state of Georgia as nurse of the year. A lot of things I've done because it was what I was supposed to be. When I told my mother at the age of 4 one day I would be a nurse. And I had this one woman who saw me one day holding my child, rocking him in the chair. She said, you know, you're supposed to be a nurse. It was like, I totally forgot about it because of my life. What I had went through, I was like, there's no way I could be a nurse. It's impossible. You know, how's that going to be? And she said, oh, yes, ma'am, you're going to be a nurse. And I see you healing your patients. You're going to sing over them. You're going to heal them with your voice. Like, yeah, I accept that. I'm going to accept that. If you can see that in me, and I know that's my dream, I can do it. All I've done since then, I became an ambassador in Atlanta with the Up Future, Not a Past project, and it's for females that are prostituted in Atlanta. Later, when I started sharing my story a few years ago, I worked at Grady in Atlanta, and my nurse compadres there that are friends of mine, never in a million years did they know my history. And when I shared it, it was just like an outpouring of like, holy, who would have ever thought? Things can change and lives can transform, and I'm a living testament, and I like to refer to myself as a miracle. That's all I'm going to say about that.